Fight Mike here. Today I'm going to be matchmaking after UFC 109, Dolidze versus Hernandez. I put together a bunch of fights that work together scheduling-wise and make sense in terms of their career progression. Starting off with the winner of the main event, we've got Anthony Hernandez. I've actually matched him up with Sean Strickland, or Deshaun Strickland as he's known. Look, I know a lot of people are matching up RDR with Anthony Hernandez and Sean Strickland versus Adesanya, the rematch, but I just hate that sort of matchmaking. It's sort of like what the lightweight division was going through for the last couple of years, where we just get Gaethje versus Poirier, Gaethje versus Michael Chandler versus Poirier, Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira versus Gaethje, where it's sort of just this love triangle of fights that just keep getting put together, and no one sort of gets progressed up the division. I hate that so much. So I think that we need to match up the two high-level prospects with the two older, more established names in the rankings. We can't just keep getting these guys to keep fighting each other. Otherwise, it's sort of like they're artificially placed in the top 5 of the division. And scheduling-wise, I think RDR likely wants to get back in there in October or November. And Adesanya fought earlier this year in February. Got TKO'd, so he probably wants to take a while off, but he's an older guy, so he should want to return before the end of the year. But Strickland's going to be facing a suspension till the end of the year, so it's better for the UFC to get Adesanya back in there before the end of the year, not making him icing him onto the sidelines, waiting for Sean Strickland to come back into play. And for Fluffy, I think he's been calling for a title shot, but you can't get one off a win with over Reinier De Ridder. And even if he's on a massive win streak, he needs one more big name, and I think Sean Strickland's the perfect big name for that one. Matchup-wise, it would be really fun between the two of them. Sean Strickland would be very difficult for Hernandez to push back, especially in the boxing. And then on the feet, it's just going to be a very fun fight between the two of them. Anthony Hernandez has unlimited cardio. If he keeps it on the feet, Sean Strickland also has unlimited cardio, and they're both quite straight shot type fighters, so it would be interesting to see how they match up with each other on the feet. And I think that Sean Strickland, out of anyone in the top 5, probably is the only one apart from RDR that has the cardio to work with Hernandez. And I would even consider picking Sean Strickland over Hernandez. That's how difficult of a fight I think it would be. Moving on to the loser of the main event, though, I've matched up Reinier De Ridder with the good old Brendan Allen. I think this is a good fight, especially division-wise. I think Brendan Allen's probably sitting around 11. De Ridder come tomorrow is probably around 10th spot, so it's a good matchup between the two of them. I think on the ground, the scrambles would be really fun to watch. I think in terms of both of their careers, it'd be handy for them to face off against each other. Both guys really need to improve their striking and their fight IQ, so it's probably a good matchup to sort of clean that up a little bit for each other. And it just would be a great scrambling matchup. Brendan Allen's sort of like a back-taking specialist, and it would be interesting to see if he even engages the ground game with a guy like Reinier De Ridder, someone who's so established in the jiu-jitsu world. It would be a really interesting fight between the two of them, and I hope to see it. Moving on to the next fight is for Steve Erceg and his opponent. I've matched him up with Alex Perez rebooking. This was the initial fight that was made, but Perez pulled out to injury, and if I'm Erceg, this is the only fight that I'm looking for. We saw in the Ode Osborne fight that Erceg's grappling still is very good for the division, but the place where we thought he was strongest, which is his boxing, is where he's showing the most holes at the moment, which is definitely in his boxing, and Perez would be a great guy to work that out on. He's got really good boxing himself, decently powerful, he's a pretty crafty guy as well. And now that he's coming off a little bit of a massive layoff and he's a little bit older now, we may see a drop in speed from Perez, so it would probably be a good time for Erceg to work on his boxing fundamentals before he gets back to the guys at the top of the division. I wouldn't hate matchups like Tagir Ulanbekov or Asu Almabayev, but I would prefer to see those two rematch against each other, because if you didn't know, Tagir finished Asu Almabayev when Asu was 4-0 in their career, so that would be an interesting rematch to have with each other. And I already know that Steve Erceg's a good counter grappler, so I don't really need to see him prove that yet. And I think coming up against Alex Perez, a guy with slick boxing, would be a good next step for Steve Erceg in his career. Moving on to the loser of the co-main event, we've got Ode Osborne. I matched him up with Andre Lima. I was considering giving O'Day a bantamweight opponent just because he looked massive and he looked really good there. But after seeing the top 15 of that division, I don't really think that would be good idea. I think I would just be murdering poor O'Day if I did that. But I think that O'Day deserves to be somewhat close to the rankings after that performance. And someone who needs to jump up in like competition is Andre Lima. He's been fighting guys like Felipe Dos Santos, Mitch Raposo, Daniel Perez, some decent level opposition and some good like prospects in their own right. But O'Day is a lot more experienced, more powerful, more dangerous than all of them. I mean, he's a very good finisher. And I think that this is a good opponent that O'Day can either fraud check or Andre Lima can get a shot in the rankings if he can beat O'Day. Moving on to the next fight I've made for Andre Feely. I've actually matched him up with Julian Juicy J. Erosa. This fight kind of means nothing to getting these guys to the rankings or to the title, but it would just be a barn burner. This is such a fun fight between the two of them. Both these guys would just box in the middle of the octagon. I'm sure the boxing exchanges between the two of them would be absolutely amazing to watch, and would be interesting to see if the hooks and the counter-punching of Andre Feely would beat the straight punches and the marauding of Julian Erosa. Moving on to the next fight I've made, which is for Christian Rodriguez. It's actually a bit of a crafty matchup for him. I've actually put him up against Ju Sang Yu, Zombie Jr., the guy that was sending Jeka Saragi packing out of the UFC a couple of weeks ago. We know Christian Rodriguez is a very good fighter and he can beat any prospect on their day. Prospects like the Austin Bashis, the Raul Rosas Jr., the Cameron Simon at the time. So let's see how our chief prospect can do up against him. To all the casual fans, this fight would go straight under the radar, just because Christian Rodriguez isn't a massive name himself. But for the hardcore fans, if Ju Sang Yu can get a win over the fraud checker himself, Christian Rodriguez, that would be a massive win for him, and I think anyone would be really impressed with that one. And the thing is, with Ju Sang Yu, some people might be saying this is too big of a jump of opposition just because he went to beating Jeka Saragi to fighting Christian Rodriguez. He's 31 years old. He needs to jump up, and if he's going to get to the belt at one point in his career, he has to get those jumps up the rankings now. Moving on to the next matchup, though, I've got it for Gene Matsumoto. I've matched him up with Ricky Simone. Gene had a very good performance over the weekend, but it wasn't the type of performance that makes me look at him and say, you need a ranked opponent now. This is the sort of fight that I see, one more fight and then you can get in there. And I think that Ricky Simone's sort of that type of guy who's just outside the rankings at all times. He's a good win for anyone. Very tough out for everyone as well. Ricky's very powerful on the feet. He's got very good grappling, very good control. And if Gene can beat Ricky, it's a good look beating the last guy that beat Marab in the division. So Ricky's a very dominant grappler as well. If he can get going in the fight against Gene Matsumoto, we might be able to run through him, but I think that Gene would be able to get it done. It's probably a good stylistic matchup for him next up. Moving on to the next fight, the second last fight that I made for this, it is for Julius Walker. I've matched him up with Ion Cutelaba. And the thing is that I've been seeing Julius Walker getting tagged up way too much in his last two fights. I need to watch him get finished just to confirm that boxing fundamentals is needed in the UFC. And I think if any unranked guy is going to cleaver Julius Walker's chin off his head, I think that that's going to be Ion Cutelaba. This would be two blockheads standing in the middle, swinging it, wild hooks at each other, shooting panic takedowns constantly on each other, and it's just a mirror matchup waiting to happen. Even though I hate when people stool up against the cage, watching these guys stool up against the cage would be fun. You would see 7 brain cells between them arguing with whoever can push each other against the cage better, and they're both strong, tough guys. And if Julius Walker can beat Ion Cutelaba, he should get a shot into the rankings, or should get one more fight before the rankings. Maybe a Modestus Bukauskas would be a good fight as well for this one. Moving on to the last fight I've put together for Elijah Smith, who got a beautiful powerbomb KO over Toshiyomi Kazama on the weekend. I've made him against Muin Gafarov. Look, I know that this is kind of a confusing fight to put together just because Muin Gafarov's not a big name in the UFC, and you'd think after a massive powerbomb KO over Toshiyomi Kazama yesterday that he would be getting like a much higher level opponent, but think that Muin Gafarov is a good guy if he wants to step up in the rankings at like a steady rate and not really push himself too much too quickly. And then, although, as we've seen Muin Gafarov lose in the UFC, we've never seen him get TKO'd in his entire career, and he's shown a very good chin throughout his career. So it would be very impressive if Elijah Smith was able to get a finish on Muin Gafarov, which I think he would. And for hardcore fans, Muin Gafarov earlier this year just beat Rinya Nakamura in a very dominant decision. So if Elijah Smith can beat Muin Gafarov in an even more dominant decision, or he can finish Muin Gafarov, then we can sort of look at Elijah Smith as he's a better prospect than Rinya Nakamura, even though that's not necessarily the case. That's like MMA math to the highest level. So I think that this would be a good fight to put up. It would be nice to see how Elijah Smith does to a guy who can wrestle him. And it would be good. It would just be a good matchup for the casual fans to sort of get hype, seeing him beat a guy with an Ov last name as well. Let me know what you thought of the video. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed. I'm sorry for all the lag. I can see on my OBS screen that it's just constantly stopping and starting my image. If you got to this point in the video, I am impressed that you could stand it. And I'll catch you next time. Peace.